Well, good afternoon, campers. How's everyone doing this fine Friday? Everybody recovered from the long weekend, Memorial Day weekend? I haven't. What did I spend a lot of time doing? 2015 supercharged Range Rover. Replacing that Y pipe that's supercharger is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. I swear. It's like the engineers, they hate mechanics. I've come to that conclusion with certain manufacturers, and I think the Range Rover falls into that category now. And here I thought it was just Polaris. So much for that. Yeah, but it will lose. It will lose. All right, guys, let's swing around and see what I missed last week or got sent in during the week on our various social platforms. Francisco F., one question, only one. The rectifier on my GY6 engine burned up. I'm not sure what a GY6 engine is, but okay. I replaced it with a new one, not original. Shame on you. And the engine fails on the middle range rotation. Okay, you're telling me it's got a rough spot halfway through the RPM range, I assume. A few minutes later, the rectifier fries again. Okay, now I'm concerned about replacing it again without knowing what the problem is. What and how should I test it? Well, we've got several videos showing how to, one, test a regulator rectifier as well as the stator. It seems to me that you're having a problem with your stator for two reasons. Usually inside of the wiring harness that's going to the stator, you also have your pickup coil, which has everything to do with your engine ignition timing. Guessing that's going to be the same on a GY6 engine. So I would be taking a long, hard look at that because something is definitely amiss. Maybe the voltage that the stator is sending to the regulator rectifier, say that three times real fast, is out of range. And I'll show you how to test that on a couple of different videos that we have. Now, there is a chance that the regulator rectifier may have too much of a load on it. I don't know what all type of equipment that you've got on your particular machine. Now, if it's trying to charge against maybe a bad wire somewhere in the harness that you just haven't seen, it's not enough to burn the wire all the way through, but it is enough to put one heck of a load on the charging system. That could be it as well. But just my initial inclination, I would seem to be leaning toward a stator problem. So if you would, at least do an ohms test on it first, see if there's anything shorted to ground, and then if at all possible, start the machine and measure your AC voltage and see what you come up with. As I've stated, yeah, we've got several videos that go through that process. ER has asked me, I have a 2020 model Kodiak 450. It starts and runs, but it won't turn off. Maybe we had one of those last week, didn't we? But not always. Sometimes it will. If it doesn't, you have to disconnect the battery for it to actually fully stop. Wow. All right. Well, let's start with the simple parts first. What type of ignition? Well, have you tested to see if it's hanging up? I mean, that's basically just a wiper in there with a set of contacts. And then I would be curious if you can't shut it off just by your, I think it's on the left side. It's run on either, off on either in the middle, if memory serves. Now, if both of those are looking right, I would really wonder if your ECU is having an issue or possibly the wiring going to it. Because, I mean, either one of those conditions is going to, shut down power to the ECU and then shut down power to the machine. So I wonder if there's something weird going on there. But let's start simple. Let's test your switches, see what you come up with, and then we'll run to the more complicated stuff. Pete Peabody. Oh, good. My Honda 400EX. Love those machines. Can't wait to get started working on ours. Has a known good battery at 12.78 volts, yes, but no neutral green light when turning the switch on. It's a no crank condition. Is this the case where would be a good place in this case, where would be a good place to start? I have a multimeter and 12-volt light. Well, we actually did a no start condition video on, I think it's one of our first ones, if not our number one, on a 2008 400EX. So first, I would say let's go watch that one and see what you can glean from it. But a no neutral green light, that's telling me that the machine will, A, either that light's burned out, probably not the case, or two, it doesn't know it's in neutral. And there's a couple of ways you can start the machine in gear. One would be your clutch, just pull it in and then start. You didn't tell me if that was possible. Or two, if the machine's in neutral, you don't have to pull in the clutch and it should start. So that tells me to follow the wire down to your neutral switch, and chances are it's been knocked off. It is just a single wire going to basically just a small switch down toward the bottom of the engine. Probably going to be encrusted with mud and grease and oil, but it will be down there. I think I discussed that in the video, although, dang, did we do that video like 6-7 years ago now? Whew. Time flies and it accelerates as you get older. If you don't believe me, just wait. David Garcia, hey John, breaking in a new engine. What if I run synthetic oil in the first oil change because I didn't know to run conventional? Do I dump it and start with conventional or stay with a synthetic? And if you've already started it up with synthetic, David, just go ahead and run with it. It's not an absolute. It's suggested, in my opinion, because I want things to wear in a little bit more. And with synthetic, it takes a little bit longer for that to happen. So I'd say whatever your numbers are, as far as what I suggest, depending on if it's a utility, sport, or race condition, double the length of time, your run time, to give it more time to run, to settle in, given that it's got the more slippery synthetic oil in it. All right. Alan Higgins had asked me, what if your bike won't start with the choke on, but will run fine without the choke? Well, you must be in a really, a warm climate, I would guess. But beyond that, that tends to lean itself, well, no pun intended, lean itself to rich condition that you're running on your machine. It's getting satisfied with fuel when the machine, and that's one of the reasons you choke it. You cut off the air to get things going on a carbureted machine. So I wonder, already dumping a fair amount of fuel on your pilot or your idle jet. I wonder if that is if that setting may be a little bit off, providing your carburetor has one. Most of the machines, they're in between 1.5 to 2 turns out. I wonder if yours has been set a little bit further and it's dumping more fuel. Nothing bad though. I mean, as long as you're not fouling plugs, go ahead and roll with it. Eric Evans had asked me, I have a question about my 2011 Grizzly 550. It has a knock noise on easy acceleration coming from the clutch case housing. Any common failures that I could look for? Now, I've talked about that one as well. I'm trying to be a broken record here, but I think we did a video on just the principal operation and then diagnosing of different CVT clutch systems. And what you're describing is probably just the inner working starting to get worn out, and they're starting to get a little sloppy, and you're hearing some knock because the sheaves that what should be a smooth action, they're starting to get worn on those pivot points or expansion points, if you will, and it's starting to chatter a little bit. So that's what you're running into. Go ahead and open it up, pull them, and then clean it up. And I know on the Grizzlies, they use a weighting system. I believe it's on the drive side, where you've got these weights that are basically rings about that big around. I think there's either 5 or 6 of them, and they're in grease, ultramatic grease. And that's what causes them to move out of the way, which allows the sheave to operate. Now, over time, that grease starts to turn into mud. So it's probably definitely time to open it up, clean out all that old grease, and then repack it. And I'm pretty sure we did that particular rework on our 700 Grizzly. So if you would look at that one's playlist, and I can walk you through it. The 550 is almost identical to it. So except for the torque values, you should be able to follow along to at least get that done. All right, let's switch around to see if we have any questions for today. Yeah, we got a few of them. Austin Price. Hey, John, I had the YFZ with oil in the airbox last week. All right, quit jumping. Got it apart. The cylinder piston were scarred up. Oh, boy. The metal shavings was from the cam journals. Oh, boy. Can the cam journals be cleaned up and reused? I doubt it, because when you start changing your surface area, in other words, reducing it to get a clean surface, you're going to have too much clearance. It sounds to me like you had a oil pump failure of some type. So it sounds like oil starvation, both on the cylinder walls and especially on the head, because it's the furthest away from the oil pump and the furthest away and the first to go when you start losing oil pressure. Now the question is, why did it lose oil pressure? That's when you're going to have to do some digging. So just don't throw new parts at it. Figure out why that oil pump was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. It may be clogged somewhere in the system. That can be a little bit challenging given all the different passageways in the engine. Detuned, a 2000 YZ250 been sitting for 3 years. Oh boy. What is the first thing on your to-do list? That's funny you mentioned that. We've got a ZX14 that's been sitting for about the same length of time, but it will go something like this. One, you need to get out whatever fuel was in there, get it cleaned out of the fuel tank. And I think that was still a carbureted machine in 2000. But at any rate, whatever type of fuel system it has, you're going to need to go through it and clean out all the gunk that is going to be there. 3 years is usually the point where it starts turning into syrup. So you've got your work cut out for you. But start there. Definitely go ahead and dump the oil out of it, because if it wasn't changed prior to it sitting up, oil as it gets used becomes pretty much toxic, believe it or not, and it almost gets an acidic value to it, and it can start damaging the inside of the engine. So yeah, dump all your fluids out of it and then just build it back up. But definitely start with getting all of the fuel system cleaned out, regardless of which one it is. The Spaz, cool. 2011 Polaris 850 XP, clunk noise in the trans. I think it's the drive coupler. Could be, but don't chase that rabbit too hard. Most of the noise I hear in those is not the actual transmission. It's typically the CVT system starting to wear, as we were talking about earlier with, we had a question on stuff from last week. So the drive coupler is pretty easy to diagnose that. Bring the machine up. You should be able to reach back there and just feel if there's any play in that CV joint, or that's the U joint that the coupler you're talking about, I believe. But more than likely, it's going to be inside the either the drive or the driven clutch. Probably the drive side. Boomer Daily, hey John, do you have any videos on your channel about replacing the bell crank shift shaft on a 2015 Sportsman 1000? Not yet. Most of our stuff stopped with the smaller machines, the 850, but the 1000, I haven't had to work on that one yet. But bell crank shift shaft, no, I haven't had to do that one yet. But hey, we'll put it on the list and maybe dive into it. But I have to get the machine first, and there's several already waiting in line. Tracy, if you're listening, we need to start knocking those out. So come on. Tracy is my primary editor number one. Problem is, she's good at what she does, and everybody asks her to do everything. So delegate, Tracy. That's the one. That's your word of the week. Delegate. The Spaz had asked me, is there a better part than from Polaris? No, as far as the that clunk noise, or the sheave system. It's really, that's the only company you can get it from is going to be Polaris. There is not an aftermarket one that I'm aware of. I mean, there's aftermarket belts you can get for it, but if you're not having a belt issue, just stay with what you've got. But if not, maybe go to a little bit stronger. There's several out there depending on what you're doing to your machine. All right. Hey, Paul. Happy Friday, everyone. So on the 2005 Polaris 400, I'm almost at the end. I'm working on the oil change finally. I did receive the manual, John, but I don't think I have to pinch off a line. I would agree. I'm glad you received that manual. Hopefully it will guide you through to the end. Kyle Sizemore, just put a spring-loaded, just put a spring-loaded timing chain tensioner puking out oil of the tensioner on 2012 XP. Kyle, did you miss that gasket that goes on there? Because there's going to be one, and it is oil pressurized. Now, it's possible. It is possible, depending on if it's, well, you didn't say if it was OEM or not. It is possible if it's damaged on the inside, because it is the amount of tension that it pulls on there. Tensioner. But first, I'd make sure I had the gasket, and you didn't really tell me where it was leaking from. So is it leaking from the base where it mounts to the side of the engine? Thanks for your help. Well, you're welcome. Austin Price, it's a brand new oil pump installed with the oil mod. I have to pull it apart and check. Maybe I didn't assemble it correctly. Hey, it happens to us all. Take a peek in there and see what you find, and then let us know. Paul is saying, can you verify, please, before I go cranking this thing up? Oh, and wow, I had 10 years of storage of fuel, and it ruined everything. Oh, hell, I bet. Well, Paul, give me a little time to read back through that one, and I'll just shoot you an email. How's that? 888 Moto, dead AGM battery for a CBR 600RR. Can I revive it or replace it with a new battery? How long has it been dead, and what voltage, if any, does it have? I mean, I've done the trick before using a larger battery to jump it, so to speak, for about a minute or two, and that'll break loose any type of sulfation that's started on top of the plates. Sometimes that's enough to kick them back over, but I mean, if it's been dead for several weeks, it may not be able to, to pop it back to life. I mean, if you throw any of these little small 3-amp battery tenders or chargers on it, they're not going to stand a chance, because it wants a shock to the system, no pun intended, to break things loose. But once one goes dead on me, I usually I'll give one shot to come back. But after that, if it doesn't test out right, it's not worth it. Just go ahead and replace it. CJ Gray, what would make the right exhaust valve be? What would make the right exhaust valve be tight on a 03 Honda 400X and won't start unless it's loose? Could it be a bad cam or a stretched valve? Well, you want a certain amount of clearance in there, and it's supposed to be 10 thousandths or something like that, if I remember correctly, 0.010. I mean, that's what you set it to, and then it should be good to go. Could your cam be causing that, or a stretch valve? Probably not the cam. If anything, it would be the valve face. As they wear, that pretty much elongates the valve stem, and of course it gets closer, and that's why you have to go through a valve adjustment process. I would say just readjust it to the correct clearance, and you should be good to go. Oh, you lost the feed. Was that on my end or yours? Yeah, but we did lose everybody last week. It just went out. Hello, sir. I have a CBR 1000RR SP. Is there a way to modify idle? Okay. Question, why would you want to? I mean, a 1000, once it's warmed up, it should be idling right at what, 750, 725, somewhere in there. you shouldn't need to change that. Of course, it's fuel injected and it's going to control the idle. Can you modify it getting into the program? Well, maybe, but my question still stands. Why would you want to? Is yours idling too high or too low? Well, that tells me that there may be something else going on, possibly an air leak. It happens. Paul says, I can wait. I'd rather be safe than very, very, very sorry. Yeah, I get it. I don't care who you are or how long you've been building engines. If you're not just a little bit scared the first time you hit that start button or turn that start switch, you're not human. Everybody is nervous. John, the drive coupler looks like a flywheel and has 8 bolts in between the engine and the trans, and the trans shaft goes through it. I think the spring has gone bad. What do you think? Okay, gotcha. So you're talking about the drive coupler on the backside. That's kind of like that machine there, if memory serves. There is a spring on the inside of the shaft that keeps it, I don't want to say centered, but pushed onto the splines like they're supposed to. I guess that spring could be failed on the inside, maybe rusted out. I've seen that before. I've seen them where that they're supposed to be able to travel and it gets gunked up with mud. So that could be the case. I still would look at the CV joint first, or the CV clutch first. 888 Motor. Thanks, John. Well, you're very welcome. Paul Gravinsky, the AGMs don't cost as much as my $400 cranking boat battery. Well, you got that right. 400? He must be a Group 27. At least you're not having to buy a 4D or an 8D. Mine has 3 4Ds in it. And I think they're right at 700 a piece. Thank God they've lasted for a long time. Now that I've said that, I'm going to get down to the coast and the damn thing's not going to start. But that's 2 weeks away, so can't start thinking about that yet. All right, guys, 3:22. I've caught you. Looks like I've got a little bit of homework to do for Paul. Not a problem at all. I just want to thank everybody swinging by, spending a little bit of time with us, especially shopping with us at Partzilla, because it makes this possible, all of this possible. Keeps me employed. That's a good thing. Oh, we got one more that came in. Opti Blue Top. Yeah, I know exactly which battery you're talking about. We'll answer one more. Outrageous penalty. Hey, John, I need help. But I bought a brand new Yuasa battery with separate acid. I just filled it, waited for 30 minutes, and the battery is dead by 2 weeks. My old battery is still be good. Huh. All right. Well, once you filled it up, you waited 30 minutes, and then did you charge it? I mean, if you can't just dump the electrolyte in there and then just pop it directly into the machine. Oh, no, you did charge. Oh, you didn't charge. Well, there you go. You have to go through that charging procedure on the first one, the first go round. I think we had a video on that as well, as far as setting up the battery for the first time. Yeah, and once that memory is shot the first time, it's not going to come back. I hate it, but I've done the same thing. But definitely want to charge it the first time around. No problem. All right, guys. I'm going to call it a day, and not a problem at all. Not a problem at all with a late question. I'm going to call it a day. Actually change shirts and see if I can finish getting that supercharger off of that 2015 Range Rover that's on the other side of that wall. Thing is beating me up. Well, once again, guys and girls, thanks for coming by, spending a little bit of time with us, and God willing, we will see you next Friday at 3. Talk to you then. Thanks.